Your electricity bill is about to fund the real energy transition. Pause. Not solar panels, not hydrogen hype, wires, transformers, reserve capacity, and all the boring infrastructure everyone ignores until the lights blink. Curious. Here's the thesis for today. The future of energy is not a technology question, it's a financing and incentives question. Who pays to rebuild the system, who gets the contracts, and who gets stuck with the bill when the grand plans meet physical reality? Sarcastic. For years, we were sold a clean fairy tale. Renewables get cheaper every year, so electricity gets cheaper every year. And yes, solar and wind got dramatically cheaper. Batteries also got cheaper. But that only solves one piece: generation. The hard part is integration. The grid is not a bucket where you pour kilowatt hours. It's a synchronized machine that has to balance supply and demand every second, everywhere, in real time. And demand is changing, not in a romantic way, in a brutal way. Data centers eat power like it's free. Electrification shifts load from oil and gas into electricity. Industry wants stable baseload. Households want reliability. Everyone wants cheap, and nobody wants a blackout. Now let's use Russia as a stress test, because Russia has a unique combination of things that should make electricity easy. Huge resources, existing infrastructure, decades of engineering competence. And yet the story coming out of the sector lately is basically, we can't build enough, we can't finance enough, and we're raising tariffs to patch holes. Look at the logic the officials repeat. We measure everything by the cost of a kilowatt hour over the life of a project. Sounds neat, sounds modern, sounds like PowerPoint. But consumers don't pay for a kilowatt hour on a turbine. They pay for the full bundle: electricity, capacity held in reserve for peaks, transmission, distribution, system operator services, reliability, and quality. That's where the real problem lives. If you tell investors, build new generation, modernize old plants, upgrade networks, but the rules make returns uncertain and financing expensive, investors do what rational people do. They don't show up. Russia has had multiple competitive selections for new capacity and modernization that either failed or partially failed because there were no bidders or only partial interest. When tenders go empty, it's not because electricity isn't needed. It's because the deal is unattractive. And here's the part that hits your wallet. Instead of fixing incentives upstream, the system falls back on the last reliable source of funding: you, households, and businesses. For 2026, the indicative wholesale market numbers point to higher prices: electricity up roughly 7.6, 8.3%, capacity up 9.7, 11.6%, and network transmission distribution tariffs in the mid-teens range. That's not the cost of one technology. That's the cost of keeping the system upright while pretending it's fine. Now add the second knife, the price of money. Russia's key rate has been sitting around 21%. At that level, long-cycle infrastructure projects become toxic. You can't preach build more power plants while the financial system makes long-term borrowing feel like self-harm. So the state does what states do when systems don't work. It escalates to manual control. You get presidential Porochinha to work out mechanisms to finance grid build-out and modernization. Translation: the institutions that should do this routinely are not doing it routinely. This is where we hit the promised contrast. Narrative. Cheaper generation means cheaper electricity. Reality: without financed grids and reserve capacity, cheaper generation just gives you cheaper instability. Now, quick international comparison, because this is not only Russia's disease. China is the clearest example of scale as strategy. When China decides something matters, it builds an entire industrial ecosystem around it. In 2024 alone, China reportedly connected $277 GW of solar. That's not a transition. That's industrial mobilization. And notice what happens next. Once generation grows, the headache becomes grid integration, storage, curtailment, and stability. Same physics, different speed. The EU is the opposite. Big climate targets, slower execution, and the grid becomes the bottleneck. More renewables are ready, but permits, interconnections, and upgrades lag. So Europe is now openly talking about massive grid investments and the political pain of paying for them. The US sits somewhere in the middle. Serious money exists for grid programs, but project timelines are eaten alive by permitting, local opposition, and interconnection queues. Again, same physics, different bureaucracy. So what does this mean for 2050? The decentralized prosumer paradise is possible in pockets, but the backbone still matters. You can put solar on every roof, and you still need a stable grid for winter, industry, and the moments when the weather does what it always does, whatever it wants. Which brings us back to Russia. The uncomfortable truth is that Russia isn't losing because it lacks fuel or engineers. It's losing time because the incentive structure punishes long-term investment and rewards short-term extraction. Dividends today, degraded assets tomorrow, and then tariffs rise to compensate. 3 concrete questions for you, because I want real-world input, not ideology. What's happening to your electricity bill over the last 12 months? Up, flat, or up like a rocket? Would you accept occasional outages if the bill was lower, or is reliability non-negotiable? If you had the option, would you rather trust the state grid to modernize, or would you invest in your own micro-independence? Solar, storage, generator. Let me close this cleanly. Energy is not a slogan, it's a system. The system is paid for either through smart incentives or through blunt tariffs. And right now, Russia is choosing the blunt option. Next episode, we go one layer deeper. Storage. Because without storage and balancing, cheap renewables are just cheap promises.